Are you down with it? If you're in the mood, we can take it to the moon. Just like a movie scene, table for two. No need to be fair, I want you instead.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Hello, my name is Inggid Aisyah with my student number A1B223044. So today I would like to summarize the topic of participants in semantic and pragmatics. So for the first is classifying participants. Classifying participants refers to grouping words or phrases in a sentence based on the role they play. This is useful in research, evaluation, and analysis. For example, in a sentence, Gina raced the car with Jack. Gina is the agent or the one performing the action. The car is the theme or the object being affected. And a Jack is the instrument or the tool used for the action. These classifications help explain how different elements in a sentence function in relation to each other. The next topic is, what are thematic roles? Thematic roles describe how different participants interact within an event or action. They are used to map the meaning of a sentence onto its grammatical structure. Key thematic roles. 1. Agent. Agent is the entity performing the action, or usually a person or animate object. For example, John gave Mary a book. John in here is agent. And theme, the entity affected or moved by the action. For example, the wind opened the gate. Gate in here is theme. And the next is experiencer. Experiencer is the one who perceives or feels something. For example, John felt the hate. John in here as experiencer. And the next is goal. Goal is the destination or target of an action. For example, he sent the letter to Alice. Alice in here is goal. The next is search. Search is the point where an action originates. For example, she borrowed the book from the library. Library in here as search. And for location is the place where an action occurs. For example, they met at the park. Park in here is the location. And the next is instrument. Instrument is the tool used to perform an action. For example, he cut the paper with scissors. Scissors in here as instrument. So, these thematic roles provide a framework for analyzing sentence meaning. Next is grammatical relations and thematic roles. In English, different roles correspond to different grammatical positions. Subjects are often agents. For example, the thief stole the wallet. Objects are often themes or patients. For example, the bowl cracked. Instruments typically appear in prepositional phrases. For example, he broke the ice with a hammer. And for the hierarchy of roles in sentences, languages generally follow a ranking of importance in terms of who can be the subject: agent, recipient, theme, or patient. Instrument location can be subject in sentence. Okay, for the next is thematic role grids. Each verb has specific requirements for thematic roles. These are represented in theta grids, or can also called thematic role grids. For example, the verb put requires 3 arguments. Put verb includes agent, theme, location. For example, is she put the book on the table. She in here as agent, the book is theme, on the table is location. If a required argument is missing, the sentence becomes ungrammatical. For example, she put the book. This principle helps explain sentence structure rules. The next material is problems with thematic roles. While thematic roles are useful, there are two major challenges. Problem 1, defining clear role boundaries. Some roles overlap. For example, is wind in the wind of open the gate. An agent, if it acts like a person or an instrument. Overclassifications leads to unnecessary distinctions. For example, beater instead of agent. Problem 2, systematic role definitions. Different linguists define roles in different ways. Doughty proposed that thematic roles should not be rigid categories but prototypes, meaning that some words only partially fit a role. For example, proto-agent is a role that actively does something. For example, Maggie pruned the roses. The next is proto-patient. Proto-patient is a role that undergoes change. For example, the roses were pruned. This prototype approach provides more flexibility in understanding sentence structure. Alright, the next material is voice. Voice include active, passive, middle. Voice refers to how the subject of a sentence relates to the action. 1. Active voice. The subject is the agent. For example, Billy groomed the horses. Billy in here as agent. Number 2. Passive voice. The subject is the patient or affected entity. For example, the horses were groomed by Billy. Horses in here as patient. So the agent can be omitted. For example, the horses were groomed. And passive voice is used when the agent is unknown or unimportant. For example, the crime was committed last night. The focus is on the patient instead of the agent. And for the middle voice, the subject undergoes an action, but no agent is mentioned. For example, this book sells well. Middle voice often describes natural processes or reflexive actions. And for cross-linguistic variations, different languages have unique ways of expressing passive and middle voice. And for the example is using another language. Alright, so we move to the conclusion. Thematic roles provide a way to understand how verbs relate to different participants in a sentence. Theta grids help define the requirement arguments for each verb, while voice, active, passive, and middle allow speakers to emphasize different elements of a sentence. Okay, I think that's all from me. Thank you so much for watching my video and see you. Goodbye.